Hello, everybody. You're listening to the Big Chill Podcast. This is episode 406, NFL Championship Weekend Preview. Hello, Big Chillians, and welcome back to the Big Chill Podcast. Welcome into our NFL Championship game preview. I'm Frank, joined as always with Eddie. Eddie, how's it going?
Yeah, not too bad. Looking forward to the weekend. Obviously, as a Niners fan, it's an exciting time.
Niners hat on again. Look at him. 2 podcasts in a row, same hat. Don't see that too often with Eddie.
That is true.
He's a man of many hats.
Yeah, both literally and figuratively. But it's a fairly new hat. I took the risk. You know, I'm a very superstitious person. I took the risk of throwing on the hat for the first time last Saturday for the game.
Wow.
It was a type of move I would not normally make. So this hat might have caused that punt block return for a touchdown.
If you had told me you'd put it on that drive, I'd be really impressed. Did you like turn it around during that drive?
Yeah.
Flip it from front to back?
Yeah, I treated it like a rally cap at one point, put it inside out on my head and stuff.
I'm also getting in on the apparel fun of the playoffs. I ordered my When Times Are Grim, Be the Grim Reaper t-shirt. And then I also ordered one for my mom with that. Hers has a Patrick Mahomes picture on it because she's a huge Mahomes fan. So I don't know if we'll get them in time. Hers seems to be closer to being delivered. Mine, I haven't even gotten a confirmation email yet, so I'm not too optimistic.
Do you know if the t-shirts even exist? I don't mean in the sense, I'm not saying it's a scam, but I bet you they do. You're trying to, in a rush, to take advantage of the fact that it's pretty topical. It wouldn't surprise me if they almost make mock-ups before they're even in a position to physically make and ship out the t-shirts.
Yeah, so I believe they exist, but I think you're right. I think they mocked them up and then probably were starting production the day. I ordered it 2 days after, so they hopefully already had them being printed, but they were from legit sites that have other t-shirts. It's not just a site that popped up that has one t-shirt on it. So that's why I bought them from Etsy stores and stuff like that have other ratings and things like that. But yeah, we will see when we get them. I'm not hopeful I get mine, but I'll just have to wait till the Super Bowl because I can wear it then.
Wow, you're just laying down the Duke of curse on the Chiefs. What a statement. You just Grim Reapered the Chiefs playoff hopes.
You know what Andy Reid's saying right now? You just got Duke of curse. Times are too grim to be the Grim Reaper. Just dig your hole and lie in it.
Yeah, the Grim Reaper has been and gone. You are currently being cremated.
That's funny. Before we start and do the preview, Eddie, I wanted to get a quick question here. So I've started a new podcast. It's this science history podcast. I love science history. I always say if there's a course I could make for universities, it would just be the history of medicine or just the history of modern inventions. I think it's just so cool, the progression and the thinking. So I found this new one that's really good podcast, and they were talking about the invention of the screw. When do you think the Phillips head screw was invented?
Ooh. This sounds dumb, right? It's either going to be way more recent than you think or way older than you think. Although I'm assuming if it was always called the Phillips head, then that might. I'll say during the Industrial Revolution, I'll go 1820.
1933, right before World War II, is when it became popular. Right during the Ford assembly line. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. So before that, it was just the straight, flat screw head. And then in Canada, they developed a square tool, a square head, which is kind of like an Allen key. But they still use them in Canada. It's just a square design. and Gerald Ford was going to use that, but the manufacturer said he wouldn't move his plant out of Canada. So Gerald Ford said, "Screw that! I'll find something else."
Gerald Ford, the president of the United States.
Not Gerald Ford, Henry Ford. Got my Fords mixed up. Yes, Henry Ford. Henry Ford said, "Screw that! We'll just get a different kind." So eventually, he found someone who was making the Phillips head, and that became the dominant one. But that's crazy to think it's not even 100 years old. That's crazy.
I'm assuming it was a Mr. Phillips.
John P. Thompson.
Okay. Do you know why it was called the Phillips head then?
No. The Henry Frank Phillips, it's named after him, but the inventor who's credited is John P. Thompson.
What do you have to do in your life to have a screw named after you?
You have to manufacture
What is your...
He started the company that manufactured it.
Okay, so someone else invented it, needed someone to manufacture it. He had a factory, he manufactured it, it became the Phillips screw.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay. That makes more sense then. Still, you would think as the inventor, really missed out on your legacy there.
But yeah, that was my interesting fact. Less than 100 years old.
You want to give that podcast, the actual name of the podcast, a plug in case you've piqued someone's interest and they want to go out and learn more about the Phillips screw?
Yeah, it's called Inside the Breakthrough.
And I guess speaking of giving shout outs to other podcasts, a former guest and friend of the podcast launched his own podcast this week. Dane, I saw, started his Masters of Sport podcast where he's speaking about, the science behind training and powerlifting and just the sort of technique of sport in general. Yeah.
So Dane has started his own podcast, and if you don't follow Dane on Instagram, then you're missing a good show. You can either follow Garage Strength or his tag, I believe, is Ghostface Milla with an H at the end.
I think so, yeah. I will agree with you.
It is interesting.
Of all the people, whenever I'm bored on Instagram and just scrolling through people's stories, I'm very happy whenever he has one. He also falls into one of the rare categories of people who, when he's just like doing like a kind of piece to camera, just speaking into it, I still turn the volume on to listen because the stuff that he says sometimes is so out there that I have to hear it. Whereas anyone else if I'm scrolling through Instagram stories, if anyone else appears and it's just them talking, you can move along. Got no interest.
No, he is ramping up his content for sure. His recent battle, fight, investigation, whatever you want to call it, is towards the person who claims eating raw livers and hearts is more beneficial for your health.
Well, I think it was raw meat in general. The guy eats like a caveman, but a true caveman diet. So he's only eating.
But he eats a lot of liver and heart. He eats a lot of the organs. So Dane went on a quest to see what that tasted like and see how that felt doing a week of it in a row. And you can watch Dane rip his teeth through animal heart and animal liver. Right on screen.
Yeah, I do appreciate he not only committed to the bit of like the full caveman diet, he ate it like a caveman. Like there was nothing stopping him from using a knife and fork still to kind of simplify the process of eating raw meat. He was just grabbing into it and tearing pieces off with his teeth. It was something I never thought I'd see, but I wasn't disappointed to see it.
He's our first guest who's ever eaten animal liver with his bare hands, I'm sure. Might be the only guest that we ever get to.
Probably. I think that's not going out on too much of a limb, but that's probably the case.
Would you eat that?
Well,
I want to rephrase this. If, let's say, we went and visited Dane one day, and he's like, "You guys hungry?" And we're like, "Yeah, it's lunchtime. We can definitely eat." And he's like, "All right, cool." And just handed you over a piece of cow liver and said, "Give me your hands," threw it in your hands and said, "Eat away." Would you take a bite?
For Dane, no. If I was in a different situation, it was like local custom and I felt as if I'd be rude not to do it, then yeah, I'd do it.
While
But
Reading,
in the
Pennsylvania's
situation,
local customs are to eat whatever liver is handed to you.
in a situation where it is just someone who's been experimenting with something, I think I'd pass. The liver, the liver at least seems more approachable because it would definitely be a lot easier to rip a piece off. The heart just looked like, I mean, that was so much work just to get a piece of it to rip away. And I mean, he was talking about it like he was gnawing on it all day, as if he was just carrying this heart around with him and just whenever he got a little peckish, just like grabbing a bite of it. But
Maybe it was. I wouldn't put it
it's a
past
real
them.
commitment. It's a real commitment.
I don't think I could do it. It just watching him eat it just really put me off to the ability to even try that.
Again, a knife and fork would have made it. I like, in terms of creating content, not just ripping it with his mouth was the right way to go. From a content perspective, that was definitely spot on. But it would have seemed more approachable with a knife and fork. If someone put a raw liver on a plate for me and it was sort of nicely presented and there was a knife and fork there, I'd probably give it a try. So, from there, do we move on to our previews for two of the last three games of this NFL season? A season that feels a little bit like it has gone on forever. Not in a, sometimes in a bad way, I guess. But for the most part, it does feel like an incredibly long NFL season. I know it's 1 week extra. It's kind of weird. It's actually throwing me off when February starts. I know that sounds weird, but I so much associate the first Sunday in February with the Super Bowl that it actually has made me not think. For example, the Six Nations is starting next week, and I normally associate the first weekend of the Six Nations with the same weekend that the Super Bowl is going on. And on many occasions, I've gone to a Six Nations match and then gone out to watch to watch the Super Bowl. And because I knew that the Super Bowl is 2 weeks away, in my mind, I was just talking with some friends about going to watch the Six Nations games, kickoff games, and was like, "Yeah, well, in 2 weeks we can go and do that." It has thrown off my whole. Feels like it's the middle of January just because the Super Bowl's on a different date. It's really messed with me.
What a first world English white male problem you've got there.
I don't think my race or nationality had anything to do with that. First world problem, sure. I'm not worrying about finding water. You're right. There are definitely people out there with much more important things to worry about, but I don't know if just expressing that definitely gave away the fact that I was white. But hey, listeners, if you are worrying, hopefully not worrying, if you are wondering about what each of us look like, you can go and follow us on our YouTube page. What an organic plug.
It is an organic plug. I thought, though, you were going to drop the Joe Rogan controversial thing he had said this week that pissed Trevor Noah off. That's what.
I did not see this.
Oh, he defined what black means. That's what I thought. Okay. I thought this is exactly where you were going.
No, I did not. This is one piece of Joe Rogan content that I somehow missed out on.
Yeah.
Well, good for Joe.
Good for Joe to be able to define what the term black should encompass.
No, I mean, it's what the world needs. The world really needs a completely uneducated comedian in his 50s sitting in Texas telling us, kind of holding court as he solves all the problems of the world based on complete quacks he's had on his podcast. Like, I don't dislike, there was a moment in my life where I actually listened to a decent amount of the Joe Rogan podcast, and there's still episodes of it. I think he's actually a pretty good interviewer because he is an idiot and he does ask stupid questions that I think can lead to a very interesting discussion, and other people would feel as if they were dumb questions and so wouldn't ask them. If you see what I mean, like sometimes it's good to ask stupid questions, but whereas initially he was trying to get people on with very different perspectives, but I think you had a better understanding of how qualified they were to share their opinion. Now you have people on. I mean, he has people on who you speak to them, and you'd think he has a number of people who come on to speak about ancient civilizations. You're assuming they are archaeologists or, from some area of expertise. Just weirdos. Just weirdos who have theories about Atlantis. have written books, and then those books have become successful because there's conspiracy theorists and nut jobs out there who are willing to buy strange books. And then it's also one of those things. Then you go on Joe Rogan, you're going to probably instantly be a bestseller just because you've appeared on Joe Rogan and plugged your book. I mean, that's where we're going wrong. Maybe we should start talking. Where do you think Atlantis is, Frank? Let's try and get ourselves on the Joe Rogan podcast.
Yeah, I think if we ask Jason Momoa, he might be able to give us an answer. Especially now that he's split with his wife, maybe he's hitting up the Atlantis.
Oh, they broke up?
They did break up in a very, very strange, completely amicable, like 21st century separation. I think it was something along the lines of these past few years have changed everyone's lives and perceptions of life, and we were caught up in the differences it caused. It was a very strange public statement, but I expect that from them. They're kind of a strange couple.
I saw an interview with Gerard Piqué, the Barcelona and Spain defender.
No. That's not what he's known for. He's known for being the husband of Shakira. In America, he's known as being the husband of Shakira.
All right, well, very successful in his own right, but sure, he happens to be the husband of Shakira, and I heard him speaking about how he met Shakira. So they first met filming the music video for the Waka Waka music video ahead of the 2010 World Cup, because that was, of course, was the official song of the 2010 World Cup. So that's when they first met, and he got her number there. And then she arrived for the opening ceremony, and the Spanish team hadn't arrived yet. So on the flight to South Africa, he sent her a text message saying, "What's the weather like there?" Which he admitted was like a really dumb text message to send in a world where you can very easily just look up what the weather is. So he expected a very short response, but she sent him these paragraphs on what the weather was like at different times of the day and how the temperature could change and all sorts of stuff. And he said he realized at that moment that she was different and that there was probably something there, and then kept texting her over the course of the tournament, and then realized that the only time he would next be guaranteed to see her was if Spain made the final, because she would be performing at the final. And he said that was an extra incentive for him to make the final. Now, Spain, awesome. Of course, went on to win. Spain went on to win that World Cup, but he
thanks
said
to Shakira.
Yes, in some ways, yeah, Shakira can take some credit for Spain winning their first ever World Cup in 2010.
That is great. Now, if someone texted you paragraphs about the ever-changing weather in today's world, would you think that as sweet, or is this person dumber than I am, not knowing that I can look this up online?
Do they look like Shakira? Because if it's Shakira, I probably
doesn't
don't care.
Matter.
If it's a normal human being, then I would take that as a massive red flag. I mean, that is a weird thing to do. I mean, but I also don't understand. You also have to put yourself in her shoes a little bit, which I guess if she is interested and you're trying to start the conversation and someone does send you that message of what's the weather like there, which like you can be the asshole and be like, can't you look at it? Like you could just do like send a let me Google this for you link and just fire that.
See, now
back.
If someone did that, I'd be like, oh, I like this person.
I would admire it, but it's probably the end of us talking. You know what I mean? Like the flirtation is probably stopping. But I think, I don't know. I'd probably be happy. I would take it as a sign of, yeah, they're interested in me.
So, yeah, Lisa Bonnet, this was her quote about the breakup with Jason Momoa. "The revolution is definitely here, and we're all facing the squeeze. If you aren't, you're in total denial. And the more you resist, the more you will suffer. Everything is crumbling out there. The personal work is understanding where empire and those archetypes live within us. The revolution is on the inside and learning to be in this new world." And that their relationship felt the squeeze of this new world that's emerging.
So they're blaming their breakup on the situation in the world. Just the kind of global
I guess.
socioeconomic geopolitical situation is the reason why their marriage didn't last.
It's just taken a toll on their life and their
I like
relationship.
that. I like that. I like it. I like the idea of taking zero accountability whilst in the process encouraging everyone to increase their awareness. I like that. I might use this just from now on. Hey, why did you fail to do any of your work? Well, I know I didn't do any of my work, but have you thought about the situation in the world lately? I have just
A revolution
couldn't
is
take my mind.
unfolding.
Yeah, I couldn't take my mind off of it. I did nothing else.
I can't be blind to it anymore.
Exactly.
So I guess the only thing before maybe we discuss the games is there has been 2 coaching hires so far. So you have the Chicago Bears hired the Colts defensive coordinator, Matt Eberflus, and the Green Bay Packers hired Nathaniel Hackett. Sorry, not the Green Bay Packers. The Denver Broncos hired former offensive coordinator of the Packers, Nathaniel Hackett. And that's led to the speculation that the Denver Broncos could now be a landing spot for Aaron Rodgers because he would be used to that offensive coordinator. That, Eddie, brought up the fact I'm about to ask you. Since Manning retired from the Denver Broncos, we know the Broncos have been searching for their next great quarterback. In the last 6 years, they've had 10 starting quarterbacks. Can you name them?
Well, no. So Osweiler would have been the first post Manning. All right. So there's one. Okay, I can't do this. I can't do this in order. Is going to be the issue here.
No, that's
so
crazy.
Drew Lock.
2.
Joe Flacco.
3.
Paxton Lynch.
4. Good one.
Well, Teddy Bridgewater.
5.
Case Keenum.
6. Over 50%. Impressive.
Yeah, but there's going to be the real unknown ones have yet to appear. That's going to be the issue. Trevor Siemian.
7. I would say you're probably done at this point.
Didn't they had the Allen guy? Because wasn't there Josh Allen and another Allen as quarterback in the NFL at one point?
Brandon Allen.
Okay. And I think that's me done.
8. Jeff Driscoll, 9. Brett Ripon, 10.
Never would have got him. Yeah. I'm reasonably pleased with that.
That's pretty impressive. In 6 years, that's the stellar list of quarterbacks the Denver Broncos have put out to compete.
I saw on a completely unrelated, well, somewhat related topic, completely different sport. Watford appointed Roy Hodgson as manager this week, former England manager, and a host of other clubs, European clubs. And I saw that since they last kept a clean sheet in the Premier League, they have had 6 different managers. They've had 3 this season. Well, Roy Hodgson is the 6th manager since they last kept a clean sheet in the Premier League. So they've been relegated and promoted since then. But yeah, 6 managers since their last clean sheet now. Roy Hodgson is their 3rd manager of the season, which is pretty impressive.
Not a good start.
No. But yeah, back to the Broncos. It makes sense that they're kind of, if he and Aaron Rodgers have a good relationship, it makes sense as a way of trying to court Aaron Rodgers. From Rodgers' perspective, I don't know if I would love it as a move, just because you're obviously going to a franchise there where you have 2 very prominent kind of all-time quarterback legends. And you run the risk then of, no matter what you do, never being able to surpass them in any way, shape, or form. So you obviously have the longer legacy of John Elway and his still level of presence within the organization. But then Peyton Manning, who is held in super high regard, and then there are theories that he is going to become a part owner, if not significant owner of the Broncos. This is a theory I think that's floating around.
I don't think it's a theory. I think it's kind of confirmed that he's in one of the groups bidding to own them.
Yeah, but whether or not they're able to really pull it off. Do you know what I mean? Like sometimes people are throwing their hat into the ring and it's just a good story and you kind of putting it out there. But I mean, that's part of the theory, right? Where I think they're not coming back for the Monday night Manning cast, whatever they were calling it. I think they're not coming back for that next year. Yeah. And again, the theory behind that is because he's expecting to be, it would be a conflict of interest, obviously, if he is a significant owner in the Broncos.
I mean, it would be just as good if they had Eli and then just brought Cooper in.
I think it might be better with just Cooper and Eli. I mean, I thought it was good.
Because you already have, like, with Peyton and Eli, they're both so knowledgeable on the sport that you don't need that. You could have one that's really knowledgeable, one that's a goofy guy, and then you have the brother relationship that makes it kind of, they're okay to go after each other. So you'll get, I think it'd be more comedy. You probably wouldn't get as many high caliber guests because Peyton is the more famous person who can probably pull in some of the more high caliber guests. Maybe, I don't know.
Personally, I wasn't a fan of when they had non-football or non-sports guests on. I found that really boring. I didn't need to hear The Rock. I mean, at least The Rock has a football background, but I don't. I mean, I always thought it was that clip where he was trying to be motivational when in the Monday night playoff game, the Cardinals-Rams game, and when the Cardinals were backed up in their own end zone, and they were asking him to do his like little motivational spiel, and he was kind of going through it as the play was waiting to go off, and then that's when they threw that really awful pick six when Murray just like underarm tossed it to a Rams defender. I don't need that. I don't need a comedian coming on and making jokes about football. I don't need any of that. I don't need to hear why a celebrity likes the game. I just want the two Manning brothers talking about football and then another athlete coming to talk about them getting like insights into their process. If it's another quarter, like it was fascinating to me when like Russell Wilson was on and then you have the three quarterbacks kind of analyzing the game live. I think that's fascinating. That's where you get real insights. Don't get the same thing when it's Snoop Dogg telling me about him rage quitting a Madden game.
Yeah. Getting back to the Aaron Rodgers, though, one last time, I also don't know how keen he'd be to go to Denver just because you're in a tough division there. You have Mahomes and the Chiefs, you have Herbert and the Chargers, and you have the Raiders with Carr, who's, I mean, if that's your worst team in your division, that's a tough division. I'm not saying the Raiders are phenomenal, but you know, if that's the worst if that's like the team you can beat up on, that's tough.
No, you're definitely right. But I mean, I don't know if he has that many good landing spots when you really look into it. I mean, some people are talking about the Niners. For both him and people are talking about the Niners for both him and Brady as possible landing spots. That if the Niners don't win the Super Bowl, they feel like they have a Super Bowl caliber team and they hand it over to a superstar quarterback to come in and win now, which is obviously what they kind of tried to do with Manning when he instead chose to go to the Broncos. They were heavily courting him at the time.
Would you trade Trey Lance for Aaron Rodgers?
I mean, no, because he's an asshole. And that's not just about his vaccination stance. I want to be clear. I don't want people to be like, oh, for political opinions, you wouldn't have him. But just overall, he seems like an asshole. And I actually think there's value in the fact that this Niners team seems very, very tight-knit. And I think that's part of the success they're actually having this season is clearly how much all of them like each other and how much they're pulling in the same direction. So I think you do risk bringing the superstar asshole in. I wouldn't have the same fears about bringing Brady in because I think at least Brady, he would just come with ultimate respect and he's the kind of consummate professional and you know that he would just help people improve everywhere in their game. Whereas Rodgers has shown time and time again, he's got no interest in helping anyone else improve.
Yeah, and let me clarify, Eddie. You were saying that Rodgers is a superstar who's an asshole, not a person who has a superstar asshole.
No, he might have both. I might. That's one asshole I'd love to see. Bet you he bleaches that thing clean.
So with that, let's get to the championship games, the two games that are still going, that are still playing, because Rogers is going to be watching them just like us. With the first game being would be 3:00 Eastern Sunday game, the Cincinnati Bengals at the Kansas City Chiefs. And what's the current spread right now, Eddie?
So the current spread as we speak, recording Thursday evening, well, Thursday afternoon U.S. time, it is the Chiefs -7. Now it has kind of hovered all week. It has been, the Chiefs +7. No, -7. What am I doing? It has hovered all week. I've seen it dip as low as the Chiefs -7.5, but then it did go Chiefs -6.5 for a while as well. So I think it's going to be within that range at kickoff, but for the time being, it's 7. And seeing as that's splitting the difference of where it's been all week anyway, it's probably a good place for it to be when we make our picks.
And I guess since there's only 2 games, why don't you give us the over and under as well? Because we'll probably discuss the score anyway.
What do you think? Have you seen this number?
I have not.
What do you think the over under is?
54.
Wow, 54.5.
Nice.
Good job.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I mean, it's an unfortunate. We kind of discussed this off the air after our last recording when you said, "Well, I guess we'll both be taking the Chiefs." I mean, I guess spoil our picks early, but I think we will both be taking the Chiefs, certainly money line. I said to you at the time, I don't know if I'll take them against the spread, just because once you go a full touchdown favorite, it's big, and I think you get torn. Then it's hard to go against the spread on the team you think will win, particularly in playoff scenarios. I think that's really hard to do. But then at the same time, you look back on last week, obviously a little bit different because 3 underdogs won outright. So obviously not a good weekend if you're just betting favorites. But, no team would have covered that 7-point spread. So you do see, playoff games tend to be tight, and a 7-point, spread. You're expecting, if you're asking the Chiefs to cover that, you're expecting them to be a dominant force in that game.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. To me, 7 is a high number. I'll spoil my pick and say, I will take the Chiefs to win, but I am actually going to take the Bengals to cover on 7. And for the main point kind of being exactly what you said, 7 in a championship game is just a lot. And we can go through the reasons, and kind of what we came up with was maybe to give some reasons as to why we think the Bengals can win and why we think the Chiefs can win, and then to do the same in the Rams-Niners game. So I'll start before we even get into that. The nice part about both of these games is there's very recent evidence of what could happen, because the Bengals played the Chiefs in week 17 and the Rams played the Niners in week 18. So in week 17, if you cannot remember that far back, the Bengals won 34-31 with a game-winning field goal as time expired. In that game, Burrows had 446 yards and 4 TDs, while Mahomes had 260 and 2 TDs. And a majority of that 450 yards from Burrow was due to Jamar Chase, who had an unreal game at 266 yards and 3 touchdowns on 11 receptions. So you had a close game that at any point in time I thought could go either way. It wasn't as if the Bengals were clearly the better team and, the Chiefs rallied back and made it look close. This was a back and forth game. So for me, it's not too hard to argue that the Chiefs can win when someone says, well, they lost in week 17 to them, but it was a very close game and it was a back and forth game. And you have, in addition to some other things that we'll get into, I think one of the main things you have to think about is pressure, expectations, and experience. And the Chiefs are at home. This is their 4th straight AFC championship at home, which is pretty unreal, with a large majority of the same team there in Mahomes, Kelsey, Hill, all returning. So they have the experience. They're used to being there, whereas the Bengals have kind of not pulled us out of nowhere. I mean, I think we predicted them at the beginning of the year to be a decent team. I said that they would be right on the cusp of making the playoffs, but no one expected this, the AFC Championship. So they're already kind of in the we've made it further than anyone expected territory. So it's kind of a doesn't matter as much. So I think that could play into it a lot. Nerves, experience, being there at home. I think that could all play into it a little bit and swing the pendulum towards the Chiefs.
Yeah, and I do think you're right. It's very interesting this week to have two matchups where they have played so recently and in games that were somewhat meaningful for all four, though I guess it is worth keeping in mind that in both instances, I think the game was far more meaningful for the teams that won that respective week. So for the Bengals, because they were in a much tighter playoff race, it meant more. The Chiefs kind of had, now the Chiefs would have, as it turned out, had the 1 seed, I guess, if they had won that game. But fundamentally, it didn't really matter to them, and they didn't know that at the time. And they knew they just needed to win one of their 2 remaining games to have the 2 seed. And then on the flip side, you had the Rams, who were also in a race to win the division and for playoff seeding, but they already knew at the time that they were in the playoffs. And then you had the Niners fighting for their lives and a chance to make the playoffs. So it is nice to have such a recent history between all 4 teams and to be able to point to a game that wasn't just a dead rubber end of the year, one team resting half their starters, but still the winners were the teams who had the most incentive to win.
Yeah. And the other thing I think that makes it nice is it's not as if it were week 5 and the offensive game plans have changed or defenses have dramatically shifted. I mean, you're going to see pretty much the same thing, the same people, the same schemes that you saw just a few weeks ago. So that's always nice. So I guess I'll kind of start with, I'm going to be taking the Chiefs, but I'm going to take the Bengals to cover. And I'll just kind of start with how do I think the Bengals can win? And I think the easy answer to that is play exactly how they did when they beat them in week 17, which is, I mean, to put it mildly, you're just going to have to outscore them and you're going to have to be perfect in doing it. What was nice is they crushed it through the air in that week 17 game. And there's no indication that the Chiefs are going to be able to stop it this time. They let up 330 yards and 4 TDs against the Bills. And what's nice, I think the Bills are a pretty similar offensive comparison to what you have with the Bengals. I mean, yeah, Allen is better than Burrow, but they're both quarterbacks who have a great arm, love to throw the deep ball. You have a great wide receiver 1 with Diggs versus Chase. You have good secondary receivers, good tight end, decent running back with Singletary versus Mixon. They're pretty similar offenses with how they like to, take that deep ball every once in a while and try and beat you with that long shot. So I think the Bengals can be successful in their passing game like they were in week 17, just how the Bills were last week. The interesting fact from that game that I don't know if they realize, but Diggs only had 3 receptions for 7 yards that game, which is crazy. So here you might have Jamar Chase
Diggs?
get a lot. Yeah, the Bills against the Chiefs.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I thought you meant.
No.
You were flipping between. I thought you were referring to the Chiefs game against the. Yeah. Okay.
No.
So you're meaning last week's game against the Bills.
Last week against the Bills, they let up a ton of yards passing TDs, but Diggs was held in check. And considering what Jamar Chase did to them last game, where he had the 266 yards in week 17, you might see the Chiefs try and switch their game plan to whatever they did against Diggs and try and shut down Jamar Chase. So that might open the door up for someone like T. Higgins or their tight end, Uzomah, that might get a lot more touches, maybe some more touchdowns. So that's something that they're going to have to get.
I love how you say people's names sometimes.
I know.
Uzomah,
if you want to call him that.
never use Frank as the base point on how are you going to pronounce someone's
I pronounce them how I want to. I'm sorry. So I and then on the other side, the defense, you're going to have to get turnovers against Mahomes, right? I mean, if you're going to outscore them, you need to stop them. And I think one of the only ways you can stop them is to get a turnover. the Bengals D did great against Tannehill, but that's Tannehill. Can they do that against Mahomes, who is an absolute gamer in the playoffs? I mean, that's how you're going to have to win. At least in my eyes, that's how they win that game.
Yeah, I think you're right. They're going to need to go into this knowing it's going to be a shootout. There's no two ways about it. If their offense performs as it did against the Titans, they lose this game, and they lose it by a wide margin. I mean, they're built. It's a good matchup for them against the Chiefs. When you look at the Chiefs starting defensive backs, only one of them is allowing a completion rate of under 70% on times that they're being targeted. It is
Not
insane.
bad.
They're also not getting a lot of interceptions. Their secondary is awful. It has been all season. And so, yeah, if they're going to be able, they should be able to move the ball pretty efficiently, that they'll need to. You would almost say if you could tell the Chiefs now, would you take a 60% completion rate on, passes to wide receivers in this game? They'd probably just take it and hope that their offense was going to deliver at a high enough rate where that didn't really matter. So, yeah, I think really the key to the game, I think, is they're not going to be able to stop the Chiefs. I think we kind of saw that the Chiefs should have won their first matchup. And I think if the Chiefs had really needed to win, it's easy to forget they were up 14 points in the first half. I think if the Chiefs had needed to win, they would have won that game. So, if they rinse and repeat on that in a playoff scenario, they're losing. So they're not going to be able to stop them. They're just going to have to keep up with them. I think the fear for them in some respects is, even if you keep up with them, late game scenarios, as we saw last week, the Chiefs become favorites. I mean, you saw the stat, which I'm going to guess you also saw, because I know you're always a fan of seeing the stats that pop up. But the Chiefs are 3-1 in the playoffs with Patrick Mahomes when their in-game win probability dips below 5%.
That's insane. I did not see that stat, but that is insane.
In the same time period, the rest of the NFL, in situations when their win percentage dips below 5%, is 1-38.
Oh my God. Wow, that could be the stat of the podcast right there. He is a gamer. He is, when the game is on the line, you want Mahomes with the ball. And what's crazy is both of us said this year he looked like he was regressing this year. And regressing is maybe a harsh word because he's the elite level, but he had seemed to come down to earth a little more in that regular season. And then you put him in the playoffs, and his last two games, this is just 2 games in the playoffs, he has 782 yards, 8 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Those are numbers for 4 games would be impressive.
Yeah, I know. And then it's going to be even more impressive when we move on to the next game and pull out Jimmy G's stats for the first 2 playoff games. I think it would take Jimmy G an entire season at this rate to get to those stats. But and then when you flip it, obviously the keys to the Chiefs: keep doing what they're doing on offense. I know that sounds like a really boring tip, but fundamentally it's just avoiding Mahomes. I mean, the Bengals are going to get pressure on Mahomes, because even though I know he performs extremely well against the blitz, and they love to bring that up, the times he does get in trouble is when he is being forced out of the pocket, when he doesn't want to be. He does like, being creative and kind of thinking on his feet and moving, but you can tell there's a difference between the times when it's a really old desperate scramble and he's just trying to evade pressure, versus when he's knows that he can step a couple steps to the right or the left and make a play. And as well as he performs against the blitz, you have to find ways to get pressure on him. I think that's the only way you can try and slow them down and force him to make mistakes. Then finding ways to stop the Chiefs' run game, which isn't exactly an amazing run game, but when you do stop the run, their offense is far less efficient. So if you can hold them, to a certain extent, I'd almost commit to stopping the run, even if you're going to give up extra pass yards in the process, just because it at least forces them into a game plan where that they have to they have to kind of give up running the ball. On the reverse side, how do the Chiefs win? I think on defense, we've already seen how many sacks the Bengals can give up. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, they gave up 9 sacks last week against the Titans and still won the game. If you can get pressure on them, then you're going to cause havoc all day long. So I think their focus in terms of trying to slow this Bengals offense down, and again, which we discussed on the last episode, Burrow will make mistakes and they'll be in good field position and he'll get a 13-yard sack, and all of a sudden a kickable field goal turns into a punt. So if you get pressure on him, good things will happen. So I think that's defensively, given their weaknesses in their secondary, that's their key to winning.
Yeah, and just to kind of jump in on that with some stats for that. So the Chiefs actually have one of the higher pass pressure ratings in the NFL, although it doesn't seem like, because their defense gives up a ton of points. They actually do pressure the quarterback well. They sacked him 4 times, Burrow, in week 17, so a decent amount. And they sacked Allen, I think, 2 or 3 times in that last playoff game, Josh Allen against the Bills. So their pressure is still there right now. And I think that's another thing where maybe in the regular season, I'm not saying guys aren't trying hard, but now that you put them into the playoffs and you tell these pass rushers, we need you to make a sack. You've been here before. You know how much it impacts us if you can get a big sack on third down, that they're going to step up a little bit even more. You see that a lot. Pass rushers, they seem to step it up in the playoffs because they know that one sack could make the difference about them going to the Super Bowl versus a week 7 win. So I wouldn't be surprised if you see an even better Chiefs pass rush. And the stat I found for the Bengals is, even though Burrow was sacked 9 times against the Titans last week and they won, they are 2-4 this year when they allow 5 or more sacks. So if you can get to Burrow, there's a good chance they're going to lose that game for exactly what the reasons you said. The other thing, how can the Chiefs reverse that week 17 form, which I agree with you. I think they were kind of overpowering them going into the second half, is you probably need to get Hill and Kelsey more involved. So that last game on week 17 combined, they only had 65 yards and 1 TD. Compare that to their win against the Bills last week in that divisional round. They had a combined 246 yards and 2 TDs. So 2 very, very different games there. And if those are 2 players that if you can get them involved, they get hot, they feed off each other, and you're scoring every time. But for me, I think the X factor, if you want to call it an X factor, isn't necessarily a player. I think it's 2 things: turnovers and red zone. And the reason I picked both of those is because I think it's going to be the only ways you can stop the Chiefs from getting 7 points. Either you get them to turn the ball over and they get nothing, or they get to the red zone and they stall out and kick a field goal. And we've seen that a lot of times. Their red zone efficiency isn't as good as you'd think it would be. It usually sits in the middle of the NFL. It's never top 3, which is kind of surprising, but maybe they get too fancy sometimes and kind of screw it up a little bit. I don't know. But that's, I think, the X factor there, is if you can hold them to field goals or get a few turnovers to stop them from scoring touchdowns and kind of just outwin them in a shootout and hope they score 6 out of 10 and you score 7 out of 10 drives. But overall, I think it's going to be a great game. I think it's going to be high scoring. I take the over, and I take the Chiefs to win, and I think the Bengals to cover. I think it's going to be close. I wouldn't be surprised if it's another overtime game or last drive win kind of game.
I'm taking the Chiefs. I've already shown my hand in that respect. I have been fluctuating a little bit over the course of the week as to how I lean against the spread and how exactly I think this game is going to go. Ultimately, I don't think that the Bengals are going to be able to keep pace with the Chiefs, and just their inability to stop the rush and just for Burrow to be in difficult situations, I think is going to be their undoing. So I'm actually going to take the Chiefs to cover the spread.
All right, and that takes us to the NFC Championship game, which will be played directly after at 6:30 Eastern times. And that is a rematch of the Week 18 Rams versus Niners matchup, where the Niners came storming back to Eddie's approval to win 27-24 in overtime.
Yeah, and it's an interesting one, right? Because if you're the Rams, obviously the Niners have had a little bit of a hoodoo over them in recent seasons. Shanahan kind of owns McVay. They're 6-0 against them in recent seasons. You wonder if the Rams slightly regret letting that lead slip and now being in a situation where a team they could have effectively eliminated in Week 18 is the one that could stop them from getting to the Super Bowl. I don't know
For
if the
sure.
Rams would have. Well, except, are you sure that they would? Do you think the Rams would prefer to be playing the Packers right now in Lambeau? I don't know if for this Rams team that's a great place to this Rams team does not strike me as one that's built to be going to Lambeau in January,
But
you know?
Eddie,
So
they are apparently going to Northern California in January, according to Vivid Seats. Did you see that stat that came out today?
I mean, I've seen some of the statistics coming out about the number of tickets that have been resold and the expectation that this is effectively going to be a Niners home game, which is what happened in Week 18 as well.
Yeah, so Vivid Seats has this proprietary algorithm that can, based off of their ticket sales and the number of season ticket holders and everything, they can, with a good range, estimate who's going to be at the game. And they're saying 65% of fans at SoFi Stadium will be supporting the Niners. So the Niners will technically be the home team in an away game.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. And then you wonder if, from the Niners' perspective, that's almost advantageous because then getting to play indoors kind of suits them for their run game. Like, I know you normally would associate that with a heavy pass offense, but still, it's just nice for them to be in a really controlled environment to know that when you do have to pass the ball, there's no other factors affecting Jimmy G. So would they almost have rather taken a a game in LA where they have the majority of fans in attendance versus a home game in the Bay Area? And I mean, that's an interesting question, but I think they probably wouldn't say it openly, but they probably might prefer being in LA in that scenario.
Yeah, and then on the flip side, in week 18, Stafford and the Rams had to end up going to a silent count in the second half and late in that game because the fan noise was so loud. So maybe this week, with more time to prepare for that, they might be less caught off guard with the fact that they're going to have to switch to a silent count. But who knows?
Yeah, you'd have to assume they come into that thinking it's going to be the same situation. And look, they just won on the road in Tampa Bay. Now, I guess the downside you would say is that first half at Raymond James Stadium. That's the name of the Tampa Bay Stadium, right? That first half, when everything was going right for the Rams, that was a pretty quiet stadium. Once the Buccaneers started coming back into that game, it was very loud. And that's when things kind of started to go wrong for the Rams. So, whilst they did come through a somewhat hostile environment in that game, you might argue that they didn't really come through it. They kind of failed miserably in the hostile environment, but they did pretty well when everything was pretty timid. So, you know, again, that's probably a positive for the Niners.
All right, Eddie,
But
tell me
ultimately,
how the Niners win. Actually, first we need to go over the spread and what's the over under.
yes. So the spread is the Rams minus 3.5. And what do you think the over under is?
As I say, it's much lower. I'm going to say 46.
Spot on.
Really?
Nice job. That's two. Yeah.
I bet a
Well
lot of
done.
over unders, so I'm
We
really
can
keen
tell.
on it.
Well, that's pretty impressive. To be half a point off on two guesses on the over unders is pretty good.
Yeah. And I legitimately had not looked at all yet what the over unders would be. That's
I will tell you the way the Niners win this game.
okay.
And in a sense, it will also tell you the way the Rams could lose this game because
Okay.
one of the Niners' strengths plays very well against one of the Rams' strengths, which I think is why the Niners and McVay and Shanahan have such a good record against the Rams and McVay. And that is because the Rams rely defensively very heavily on the fact that they can disguise the coverage that they're in. So, according to Pro Football Focus, they disguise their coverage 55% of defensive downs, more than any other team in the league. And I think if you really look at how the playoffs have gone this season, you can tell that that's been having an impact on the opposing quarterbacks that they're playing. definitely on Murray. He had no idea where pressure was about to come from and was just running for his life pretty much all game. And even against Tom Brady in that first half, he seemed totally confused. I mean, it took him, he had one completion in the first quarter, I think. He was really struggling to get a sense of exactly what coverage the Rams were lining up in.
Yeah, and just to, I'll give you another stat on that too. Since week 10, the Rams have held every QB under 100 QB rating, and that includes Kyler Murray, Russell Wilson, and Tom Brady in that list.
Yeah, so I mean that is the key to their defense and one of their strengths of their team, and it's kind of the backbone of McVay's approach to football in some respects. Now, the thing that works well for the Niners, on the face of that, you would say that sounds like a nightmare for Jimmy G, who is often a one-read quarterback, can stare down receivers, doesn't necessarily read the game maybe as well, certainly not as well as, say, Tom Brady. So you'd think that's a recipe for disaster. The thing that works well in the Niners' favor is how often they put men in motion pre-snap. So they put men in motion on 70% of offensive downs pre-snap. That is almost twice as much as league average. And what that allows them to do is it gives away the defense's coverage because they have to see how they react to the man in motion. And so that is giving Jimmy G and their offense just a slight advantage every time they snap the ball. And I think that is why they've had such a good record against the Rams in recent seasons. And fundamentally, it boils down to that. Can they continue to get a sense of what the coverage is for the Rams pre-snap? And then can they run the ball effectively? Said it before, I'll say it again. They've never lost with Shanahan when they've run the ball 40 or more times. You don't want to be in a situation where they're having to rely on Jimmy G to carry them here. Obviously, based on his performance last week with 0 touchdowns, I mean, you gave the stats for Mahomes so far this postseason. I think Jimmy G has 2 touchdown passes, 2 interceptions, only a couple hundred yards. It's not exactly an impressive performance so far from him, but he's done what he's needed to do, and he's made plays at key times. So I think for the Niners, it's just a case of doing what they do best. And I see no reason why they won't.
Yeah, just to give you those stats, Jimmy G has 303 passing yards, 0 TDs, and 2 interceptions in his 2 playoff games. So much different than what you saw with Mahomes. I agree. I love the analysis there with the disguising the coverages, and that is the Rams' strength. The other Rams' strength, however, is they have a pretty good rush defense, and they're going up a team in the Niners who you said loves to rush the ball, and they win when they rush the ball. My worry with the Niners is Elijah Mitchell, who has been pretty decent all season, has started to decline a little bit in these last 3 or 4 games. His yards per carry has gone down every game in his last 4. And while that might worry me a little, the fact that you have Deebo Samuel there, and when you need that clutch run, he's going to be there, kind of makes me not care so much about what Mitchell's yards per carry are, especially considering the fact when the game was on the line on that last game and it was 3rd and 7 and you needed that run to get the first down, they went right to Deebo Samuel for it. So I'm not that concerned. They'll find ways to get yards. It doesn't matter who it is.
The Mitchell yards per carry as well have to bear in mind he was out and injured, right? So there is an element that he is being reintroduced to the offense. So he's not getting the same number of carries as he was at one point in the season, not the same types of carries, and he's probably still finding his feet and getting back to full fitness mid-game.
Yeah, that's very true. And then the other way, on the other side of the coin, I guess you could say, the way the Niners win is to kind of repeat that formula against the Rams offense that they've done both times this season. And I guess the other interesting thing to point out too is the first time they played each other was relatively recent. Was it week 10 or week 11? So this will be the 3rd time they've played in the last almost 3 months. But in these 2 games they played this year, Stafford has 2 interceptions in each game, and he's been sacked at least twice. He was hit 13 times in week 18. So they took a beating to him.
I'll add a stat into that.
Go ahead.
Which is my Niners' defensive key to winning that game is exactly what you're touching on, the pressure they can get on Stafford. Stafford is another quarterback who typically performs pretty well against the blitz. The advantage for the Niners is they get pressure without blitzing. They get pressure from what?
Go ahead.
Why?
Go ahead.
That's where I'm interested in seeing why. Is this a stat you wanted to share?
Yeah, but you can go ahead. You can finish it.
No, you go for it. I don't want to
Okay.
steal your stat. It's a good one, so go for it.
Maybe it's a different one, but so what Eddie's alluding to is Stafford against the blitz actually has the best quarterback rating in the NFL at 140. However, when he's facing pressure, it drops from 140 all the way down to 63, which is, I believe, second worst in the NFL. So again, against the blitz, he's great. Against standard pressure, he is not so good. And that plays right into the Niners' hands because they have a mean front four. And you have Bosa, who had 2 sacks last week, and you have Eric Armstead, who has 6 sacks in his last 4. So those two alone, if they can stay on the field, they can wreak havoc on Stafford and really disrupt him with standard 4-man pressure where then they can drop the rest back into coverage.
Yeah, and so I'll build on that. I actually had some stats more relating to the Niners defense. I did have the stats on Stafford, but some additional ones. So since week 10, the Niners have a blitz less than 20% of the time, but they have a top 5 pressure and sack rate in the NFL. So that reveals the fact with a 4-man rush, they can do a lot of damage. And similarly, in their 2 matchups so far this season, they have only blitzed on 14% of defensive downs, but they have got pressure on Stafford on 44% of defensive downs. So again, showing the Rams are not in a position to stop the rush, even when they're only sending 4 men.
Yeah, and then, you know, the other part of that defense is obviously the run defense. And the Rams, while they're, I mean, when you think of the Rams, you don't think of, oh, amazing run game. You think of Cooper Kupp and Stafford and now Odell Beckham. But they were averaging 99 yards a game, except when they play the Niners this year, they went for 64 and 52. So they do like to try and establish some sort of run game and then build off of that run game. But the Niners, at least in these 2 games, have completely shut that down, in part due to that front four, but also a lot with Fred Warner, who's an amazing linebacker and can really clog up the holes. So to me, you know, I think a lot's going to rely on that front four for the Niners, and a lot is going to rely on getting pressure and having Stafford make mistakes. Because what's interesting is whenever I watch Stafford not play the Niners, he seems to be doing really well. But then when he plays the Niners, it's like a whole different game. So if you can get that same Stafford turnover performance, I think they have a great chance of winning. If you get the Stafford that we just saw last week, that could be trouble for the Niners, because I think their only weak point in their defense is their secondary.
It is. No, undoubtedly it is their secondary. And I mean, they're kind of running on fumes a little bit in that secondary. Now, the good news for them is Thomas, who has been their standout cornerback this season, did practice today. So you would hope that he'll be playing on Sunday. Now, again, it's always a concern when you have a cornerback coming back from an injury who might not be like 100% and going at full speed, and you're expecting him maybe to line up against some of the best wide receivers in the game. Is not necessarily a recipe for winning, but the rest of their secondary is so bad that they kind of have no choice other than to throw him in at the deep end. So it's probably good news for them, but it's not the best news I've ever heard.
Now, Eddie, let me tell you how the Rams seek revenge and win this game. But since, I forget what the stat was, but probably since the modern playoff system, teams that have swept the regular season are 20-12 in that 3rd game. So the Rams are going against history here and winning, where they have about a 30% chance, according to history, to win this game. But here's why I think the Rams are going to win, and I am picking the Rams to win this game. Cooper Kupp in both games against the Niners, played well, over 115 yards in both, but they didn't get production anywhere else. And as much as it pains me to say this and scares me in putting my reliance on it, this is a big game for Odell Beckham Jr. here, because in the first game, it was his first week with the Rams, so you can scratch that one off. But in week 18, he did not it was not a factor. I think he had 2 or 3 catches, maybe even under 20 yards, something really poorly. He, I think, is the X factor here. They know Kupp's going to get the ball, and I think they're even okay with it. I think if you told the Niners Kupp gets 150 yards, but they get 40 yards passing from everyone else, they're fine with that. So the Rams need to get someone else involved, and it's going to come down to Odell Beckham or Jefferson. So one of them has to step up. And it's scary to rely on that, but I think he has been playing really well recently. He has a touchdown in almost every game in the past 5-6 weeks. So if OBJ can step it up, they have a good chance of winning. On the other side of the ball, bringing in Von Miller has been really good for them. He has at least 1 sack in 6 straight games. And you have Floyd on the other side, and you have Donald up the middle. So another team that has a brutal front four. If they can get to Jimmy G and rough him up, who knows how many turnovers that guy's going to have. He's due to have 1. If you can get him to have 3, that's great. We highlighted the stats. He's not playing substantially well. He's doing what he needs to do to win, but it's not great. So with that pressure and with the coverages they can put together, if they can get solid pressure and make him make quick decisions, like you said, I think that's going to spell trouble for the Niners. And on that defense, the other thing is maybe this is a little fact, but you have Kittle, who hasn't played numbers-wise that great. He's doing a lot blocking, and you can't disregard that. But at least receptions, yards-wise, not eye-popping numbers. And the Rams just played Gronkowski in the Bucs and shut him down pretty well. So there's a chance they put a similar kind of spin on that and shut him down. We'll see. Kittle had a terrible drop last week.
I'm happy to listen to reasons why the Rams will win, and I'm certainly not dismissing their chances of winning this game. However, comparing as good as, even if you consider Gronkowski to be the greatest tight end of all time, comparing Gronkowski now in 2022 to George Kittle is such an insult to George Kittle. I mean, he looked just done in that game. He was lumbering. I know he made, 1 or 2 big catches as they started to come back into it, but there was the one moment when he got kind of open and made a pretty big play and probably picked up 30, 35 yards. He caught it and was just immediately looking around for people. George Kittle or Gronkowski in the past would have been trying to go for the end zone, and Gronkowski instead was, I think, hoping someone could tackle him as soon as possible because he probably can't make it past 40 yards anyway. But I will do my reasons why or how the Rams can win this game. I think you're 100% right on the pressure and forcing Jimmy G to put in situations where he makes mistakes. I think the bad news for the Niners in that respect, you've had the Rams have had pressure by 7 different Rams players have combined for 46 pressures in the postseason so far. So they are getting pressure from everywhere. The Niners are not then helped by the fact that Trent Williams did not play today, did not practice today. He picked up an injury late in the game against the Packers. And you're talking about probably the best left tackle in the game. Someone, if you're going to try and stop the pass, the rush, you're definitely going to need. And so either having him, when he only came back last week, to have him be injured again is a real shame for the Niners. Don't know whether or not he'll play. Seems unclear at this point, but definitely he's not going to be totally healthy. So that's a blow. Now, worth saying, Shanahan has come out and said he did not get injured on the play where he lined up his fullback, which I know got a lot of social media shares of just Trent Williams demolishing a couple defensive players. What I did like Shanahan saying, whilst denying that was how Trent Williams got injured, he did say, "I do not know how that's legal." And I thought that was an interesting thing. But so anyway, That is one of the reasons why I think the Rams could win. I also think we've spoken about too, this Niners team, although they came back from 17 points down against the Rams in week 18, not built to come from behind. And this Rams team has shown itself to be a really fast starter in recent weeks. Saw it against the
Why
Niners.
did we get rid of Sam?
Why?
Our listeners might have picked up on it. You can keep going.
No, you can't hide it from me. I'm gonna hear it back when I listen to it before the listeners get it.
What did you say the Niners aren't good at doing?
Coming from behind. Okay. Okay. Anyway, so yes, they are not good in mounting comebacks. Do you prefer that? However,
I don't know if mounting is much a better word, but okay.
This Rams team has been a fast starter in recent weeks. They obviously were against the Niners. They were against the Bucks last week when they were 20-3 up at halftime, and then they were against the Cardinals when they were 21-0 up at halftime. So they've definitely shown, and we've always said this. You know, we mentioned it a lot. When plays are scripted in the, you're on your first possession, maybe second possession, the Rams have shown themselves to be incredibly efficient in those scripted situations. So there's every chance they rush out to a lead. And whilst the Niners did it in week 18, I definitely don't, as a Niners fan, want to be in a situation where they're down by multiple scores and having to maybe pick a different game plan mid-game. And my other reason would be that the Niners, who were the leading the league early on in terms of their red zone efficiency, I think it over getting touchdowns on something like 67% of their red zone possessions early in the season. That's kind of dropped off and gone back to what you would more expect for a league average. That's a bad sign because this could well be a shootout. And you're going to be in a situation where you want to be as efficient as possible in the red zone. So the fact that there is a little bit of a drop off there, and that their run game within the red zone might not be quite as dangerous as it was at one moment, that's not great. So I think if you're the Rams, you want this to be a high scoring game. You want to put the Niners in a situation where it feels like a shootout. And if that happens, I think there's concerns that at some point cracks will show in Jimmy G in that offense.
Yeah. For me, I'm going to take the Rams here to get the final revenge. I just think they're a more talented roster, especially with some of these late additions in Von Miller, who's played well since getting here, Odell Beckham, who's played well since joining the team. I will say 23-17, somewhere around there. So I'm going to take the Rams to win, the Rams to cover, and I'm going to take the under in this one. I agree with you. I don't think the Niners of late, besides that win against the Rams, I don't think they've scored over more than 20 points in the past 6 weeks. So I don't see them putting up a ton of points.
Well, we are going to be total opposites here. I am taking the Niners to win, the Niners with the points, and I am taking the over. And I know that over the course of this week, one other thing we are undoubtedly going to hear repeated time and time again is that it's a disadvantage for the Niners to have played the Rams twice, and how history shows that if you've swept the regular season series, you lose in the playoffs. This is a trope that I think appears basically every postseason.
But I just gave the stats 20-12 are teams that have swept. So
no, I know, but I'm just saying we are going to hear it. We heard it. We've definitely heard it. I think we heard it last year. Bucks Saints, I want to say, did they play each other in the postseason? But I feel like you hear it almost every postseason, and every time people talk about how it is a disadvantage for the team. But yeah, I think I'm not super confident, I will say, but I'm somewhat confident. Now, I guess that wraps up our NFL coverage for the week.
Yeah, stats galore. Stat extravaganza.
True.
I love when you tap into Pro Football Focus, because I love Pro Football Focus. I spend way too much time seeing how poorly all the Giants roster is graded on Pro Football Focus. I will, out of random points, text my dad, the Giants don't have anyone in the top 15 of any position in Pro Football Focus. You get lost sometimes looking at all the analysis and the grading they have there. I love it. I'm an analytics guy. I feed off it.
I'm typically not. I mean, I like a good stat, but I'm definitely not someone who's going to be sort of scouring through the statistics to find something that appeals to me. But for a playoff round, I'll take a closer look.
If I'm stat guy, then what are you? Feelings guy? That was Sam. You can't
No,
take
that's
that.
Sam.
I'm
I
stat
don't
guy.
know.
Sam's feelings guy.
I'm just the right guy, I guess.
You're the gut guy.
But I mean, that does mean the same. I know you're making that it does mean the same as the feelings guy, though. But yeah, and I mean, sad. This week must have been tough for you though, with Ben Roethlisberger announcing his retirement. Avid listeners of the podcast will know just how much you admired him and how what a big of a fan you were of both him and the Steelers.
Yeah. I mean, the Steelers now instantly become a playoff team, right? Got rid of Big Ben. They're good to go now.
It is hard to imagine them having someone, and again, it's not a knock on how good
Well,
Roethlisberger was at times over his career. And we've spoken about other elements of his legacy on previous episodes. However, the past couple of seasons, he has been, I mean, he looks like he's running through mud. I mean, there was one moment right against, who was it, against the Browns, when he just sacked himself when he like fell over. So there is definitely, it's hard to imagine them having a downgrade at the quarterback position.
unless it's Mason Rudolph, then it's a downgrade.
Yeah, but well, just because he's too busy throwing racial slurs around to focus on actually completing passes.
Yeah, I mean, we've discussed it previously. He was a good player on the field, and he's a 2-time Super Bowl champion, 6-time Pro Bowler,
and quite the player off the field.
Okay. Way to make light of sexual abuse allegations, Eddie.
Assault. I don't think he was ever accused of sexually abusing anyone, just sexually assaulting them. Not to say that that's a good thing, but I do think their accusations were firmly in the sexual assault. And I think more than accusations, but were firmly in the sexual assault category.
Actually, Eddie,
no, speaking
on that topic real quick, you'll be happy to know I was listening to ESPN radio, and I think it was the Spain and Fitz show, and they were on your side, Eddie, and were making a strong case that everything has kind of been brushed under the rug, and people are failing to bring up the fact that as good of a player he was on the field, he had many, many issues off the field that people just seem to forget happened and acknowledge, and that it's a major disrespect to all the people that were involved in that situation, and how difficult it probably was for them to even speak up and say something, and that you shouldn't just because he was a great player on the field that you don't bring up what happened off the field. And I think they were referencing who announced that last game. Chris Collinsworth had basically brushed by it in his praise of Ben Roethlisberger during the game.
No, 100%. And look, I definitely think if you were one of the victims, when he's retiring and being spoken about as a pillar within the Pittsburgh community and just what an upstanding member and an inspiration and example for all of us, and you think of what this person has done to you, and then, well, it doesn't matter because afterwards he gave some money to charity and kind of turned into a nice guy, but he did something that may or may not have. I mean, certainly will have had a major impact on your life. Who knows how severe of an impact that is? But that has to be difficult. So I do think, and again, it's not an inconsistency in the NFL. The NFL has shown itself to be a very forgiving league, and the supporting public and the fans of the NFL have shown themselves to have short memories when it comes to transgressions of players. I mean, Michael Vick eventually was accepted back in. Numerous players who have had sexual assault allegations and abuse allegations and gun charges and drug charges and DUIs and pretty much anything. If you can get out of prison,
vacuum abuse,
and it's exactly. If you can get out of prison at a time when you are still healthy enough to play in the NFL and young enough to play in the NFL will accept you and will forgive you. So there is consistency there in some respects. So it would be, I guess, in some ways unfair to single out Ben Roethlisberger in a way that we won't everyone else. and also to single him out because he's not in terms of what he did, but in terms of who he is, maybe more high profile. So whereas a defensive lineman could do horrific things, but then no one really cares because we don't really know who they are sometimes, a quarterback is going to get far more attention just because of who they are now. You could argue that the money they earn and the endorsements and everything is this is the cost that they pay for it. But it's definitely not an inconsistency, but it's probably not a good thing. And again, I think we should be able to speak about it in a positive light, which is acknowledge what happened, but then speak about his growth. And again, what conversation we had previously, there's good parts of cancel culture. Sometimes the bad part of cancel culture is it wants to treat you as if you've done something wrong and you can't improve or learn from it. Maybe he's improved and learned from it, but the only way to be certain that he has is to bring it up from time to time so that he can say that himself. And he doesn't have to constantly apologize for it, but at least acknowledge that at some point in my life, I was not this outstanding person you're making me out to be.
Yeah, well said.
Now, complete change of course here. You love stats. A stat that I saw this week. Barcelona are obviously another topic we have mentioned at times on the podcast, struggling financially. It's part of the reason.
Not according to them.
Messi had no,
they're fine.
They are taking the Ben Roethlisberger approach and just brushing those finances under the cover, and
probably just in the shredder, literally.
Yeah, out of sight, out of mind. Yeah, another like late notice arrives on a bill, and they just toss that thing immediately. If you don't open it, it doesn't count. But I was interested to see that between 2016 and 2018, Barcelona spent a combined 213 million euros on Andre Gomez, Lucas Digne, Philippe Coutinho, and Yerry Mina. All four of those players played in the recent match between Everton and Aston Villa. I thought that was money well spent, clearly.
Jeez. Just for reference, what is Everton or Aston Villa's financial report?
I mean, both clubs, Everton they both have wealthy owners, and neither of them are huge spenders. Everton have spent a little bit more. I guess the more interesting thing, you're talking about a team that's, in Aston Villa's case, 11th in the table, although maybe trending slightly upwards since the appointment of Steven Gerrard as manager. Everton, who are also changing manager or yet to appoint their new manager, but having just sacked their manager after their most recent match, are 16th in the table. So whilst financially both of those clubs may be relatively well run and have not spent tremendous money bringing any of those players in, certainly it shows that Barcelona's decision to sign those players for such large sums of money, clearly not a wise one, because there is very little resale value and their careers have not developed in the way that they would have expected.
I was just asking what the total salaries, though, of Everton or Aston Villa are.
Oh, well, I mean, it's not the U.S., so you can't...
It's tough, right? I thought you can get, like, estimates, though, can't you?
You can get estimates. I don't know how accurate those things are.
I'm just wondering if the 293 million spent on those four players by Barcelona is more than either of those teams spent.
Well, 213 million. That's just on transfer fees. That's not on salaries. That's literally just signing them.
That's so good.
So you can add a considerable amount on top of that in terms of salaries.
I thought that was everything.
Fees
I thought it was everything. No. That's just transfer fees.
That's just transfer fees.
Wow. Well, good thing they shredded that so that they don't have to pay it.
Yeah. And from another completely different sport too. I don't know if you've seen in tennis. I know we've mentioned the booing and Medvedev being critical and Andy Murray being critical of the fans at the Australian Open.
They're not booing, Eddie.
They're doing the Ronaldo celebration. However, they have seemed to have gone completely to booing now. So after Berrettini beat Monfils in his quarterfinal, to become the first ever Italian to reach the men's semifinals at the Australian Open, he was booed both during the match. At one point, too, the crowd was so raucous during Monfils' serve that the umpire had to tell them, "If you don't want to watch, you can leave," was a statement that the umpire made mid-match. But even during the post game interview, which takes place on the court with the player standing there, which is normally a time when they say pretty banal things and the crowd claps and applauses and they kind of wave to them for a bit and nothing is gained, but it's a nice moment for everyone. He was booed throughout this and insulted. There were some swear words thrown in his direction. He responded by saying he couldn't really understand what they were saying, which may or may not have been the case, and that they're probably not real tennis fans, at which he got applause for saying that. But generally, fans at the Australian Open have certainly not painted themselves in a positive light this tournament.
No, and then you hear more and more about the Nick Kyrgios, his doubles play, which he's now him and I forget what his partner's name is in the doubles, but they've advanced to the finals, and it's going to be an all Australia finals, which I don't really take much into that because I'm sure there's a lot of people that aren't traveling to the Australian Open because of the restrictions. But regardless, there was
from a tennis. No, I think pretty much everyone was there.
Yeah.
Doubles is always a weird one because you have the highly seeded specialist doubles players, and then you have players like Kyrgios who dip into it. Kyrgios is extremely well suited to playing doubles because very good serve and he's very good at the net. One of the singles players with the best net play in tennis. The downside being he sometimes doesn't maybe concentrate as much as he should and tries kind of weird shots at the net that other players wouldn't do. But that's also reflective of just the touch and feel he has for the ball. But it's always weird to me because you get in this weird, they're the top seeded doubles and then they'll come up against someone like that where it is a primarily a singles player, and most of the time the doubles specialist will win. But in this case, Kyrgios and his partner have managed to storm to the final.
Yeah, and then in the quarterfinals match was the really controversial one where they were riling up the fans against their opponents, to which their opponents did not enjoy, and that was watching some of the antics was pretty ridiculous. And then in the semifinals, I saw Kyrgios had an absolute meltdown and screamed at the chair umpire and then broke his racket or something like that as well. So pretty standard. But in the finals,
yeah, it's Kyrgios. And I also saw in a post-game press conference, someone asked him the question of, well, you've been really entertaining fans over the past couple of weeks. And he said, years. And you have to like him, right? He has a lot of charm. I'm always torn because, I think removing some of the kind of traditional sterile approach to tennis is a good thing for the game and adding personality into the sport. At the same time, I think he sets a bad example for younger players in some of his behavior. Not all of it, but some of it, like the racket smashing and some of the swearing and the yelling and the screaming that goes on. Okay, you can do it when you're playing in professional tennis. If you're doing it as a kid, you're just a brat. So, and as someone who played tennis growing up, I played against people like that, and it's awful. So, you're setting a really bad example for younger generations. I think that's the shame. And there's so much, there's great aspects to his personality. And it's a shame that sometimes the stories that can take over are the negative things. But what I did find interesting, another statistic for the podcast, and this one really took me by surprise, that this is the first time in 33 Grand Slams on the men's side, on either the men's or the women's side of the draw, that there are no first-time semifinalists. Now, considering that a lot of the major, aside from Nadal, I think, well, Medvedev and Tsitsipas, bigger names, but I think for the most part, if you definitely think on the men's side where there's no Djokovic, no Federer, Murray didn't make it, Wawrinka, who in recent years, particularly at the Australian Open, has been pretty good. It's surprising that, and then if you look on the women's side, no Serena Williams, Halep didn't make it. Some of the bigger names have all failed to make the semifinals, and yet everyone who's made it has been there before.
Yeah, that is pretty interesting. Yeah, and I guess since I'm the stats guy / analytics guy, I wanted to end on the Patrick Mahomes article with his Whoop device, which tracks his heart rate, and it tracks other things as well. But I mostly use it just for heart rate. It tells you a lot about strain and recovery, which is really neat, but it's just cool to kind of see how your heart rate fluctuates during an activity, you know, like when I play hockey and things like that. And you can relate it back to certain points of the game, which is kind of neat. And that's what they have done with Mahomes is they took his entire heart rate from the game and kind of analyzed it and broke it down during specific points of the game. So what was neat is his average heart rate was 144 beats per minute. His lowest it ever got was 179 beats. Lowest was 79 beats per minute. And the highest it ever got was 191, which was his first quarter rushing touchdown, which is interesting that it never got that high at the end of the game with everything going on. But during that 64-yard touchdown pass to Tyreek Hill with a minute left, it was at 171. And then even when he was on the sidelines and Harrison Butker kicked that game-tying field goal, it still went up to 162. So pretty cool to see. I wish they would do it. I mean, I know they can't right now, but kind of how the Ryder Cup was doing it live as they were kind of teeing off, you could see it. It'll be cool when they integrate that and you can kind of see sometimes or once in a while. They don't have to do it during the play, but maybe like as he's going to the huddle, it'll just like flash up what his heart rate is. Would be kind of neat. I think that'd be cool to see.
I don't need Chris Collinsworth telling me about what Patrick Mahomes' heart rate is as they're in the huddle. I get what you're saying. It's kind of interesting data. It's at the same, in some sense, it's surprising. In the other ways, it kind of makes like, look, if he was off the charts constantly throughout the game, probably not going to perform pretty well. And it makes sense that his heart rate goes very high in situations where he's actually not in control, and he kind of just turns into a fan, sitting there. And I mean, I know anyone who knows if you're spectating and the team you support is there, and you got no control over it, your heart rate can get going pretty fast too.
Yep. Even Tony Romo, when Butker was going to kick that field goal, screamed out, "I'm so nervous." Ultimate football fan Tony Romo, which is why I love when he announces.
Yeah, but yeah, it's kind of I don't know. I take all of it with a little pinch of salt.
Yeah, me too. I think it's just cool. It just adds a little layer to the game and how you can kind of interpret it a little. The interesting one was his total calories burned during that game was 2,347 calories during that game, which is more than the standard amount that a male should eat in a day. 2,000 calories. So he burns a significant amount during that game.
That seems kind of low to me.
It's not for someone who uses the Whoop every day and does a ton of activities. Like that to me is a lot, considering I'll do 7-8 mile hikes up a mountain and I still can only maybe get to like 1,400 calories is when I max out at.
How long does that hike take you?
Like 5 hours, 6 hours.
Okay, so the length of a football game.
Yeah, a little more.
Yeah,
it's a decent amount because you got to remember too, he's not playing the entire time. He's only playing half the game.
No, but he has there's the nervous energy, which is still going to be contributing, kind of like with that heart rate being so high when he's sitting, and he's still doing, whether he's warming up his arm or, there's activities going on the sidelines that will still be contributing to his calorie burn. Like, I don't know. I would have probably guessed higher. Sam, if he'd been on, probably would have guessed like 45,000. We can remember how out of touch he was with stuff like that.
That was funny. All right. Well, with that, I will have my Whoop on during the games. And if it's a very intense game and for some reason I have a lot of money on the line, maybe I can get a live video of how high my heart rate gets. But chances are most of that won't happen.
You mean none of it? I'd say chances are none of that happens. Okay. Certainly the key thing, which is you live streaming your Whoop, almost certainly won't happen.
Well, they have a video portion of their app that you can like record yourself with all the vitals on the side.
How much is a Whoop per month?
I don't know. I just put it in the shredder. I don't pay for it. I think it's $20 a month.
All right. And do you think it's worth it?
No.
Well, there we go. Not a sponsor, probably won't be a sponsor.
No,
but hey,
the data is really, really neat. I don't use it to the extent I should for it to be worth the money. I'm using it to literally send to my friends, like, look how crazy this game of hockey was I just played. My heart rate was at 80% max almost the entire game. But I'm not using the data where they then tell you, you need to recover this much to be efficient to do this much activity the next day. I don't use that to my advantage, and I probably should, but I just do whatever I want to do when I want to do it, and why I probably feel like shit most days because I'm not listening to them. But that part of it then becomes worth it if you're a serious athlete and you can kind of use that as an extra tool into optimizing your performance, for sure. A lot of buzzwords in there. A lot of buzzwords.
Yeah. And I guess, hey, look, we'll set that up as a little YouTube video and see if that goes viral with just the question, is Whoop worth it? That'll probably end up getting our most views. That will be our little short clip. And hey, if anyone from Whoop is watching this in the future and you want to change Frank's mind and sponsor the podcast, a little bit of money and you can get Is Whoop worth it? 100% yes. I'd get 2, wear one on each wrist.
They have their own podcast.
Well, yeah, but
they had Mahomes. They had Mahomes on a few months ago.
That doesn't mean that they don't sponsor other podcasts. Anyway, all right. Well, looking forward to it.
All right, I'll talk to you later.
See ya.
Cheerio.